part of your professional career, you've been working in the energy sector. Is there evidence that you've learnt there that threatens long ages?
Absolutely. In fact, I worked on a project. It was $1 billion project where we were taking the buried vegetation that was in sediments and digging up these rocks, and we were turning them into oil in 3 minutes. Not 3 million years or 300 million years, 3 minutes.
That's not supposed to be possible.
It's absolutely possible. We were doing it for a living and we were producing it.
How are you doing it?
There were planes flying around the world using that oil. So how will we do it? Now, the way we did it was under some very aggressive conditions that are not found in nature. So the temperatures we were using were higher than what you find in buried sedimentary rocks. But as a result of this process, I read a lot of research about oil formation, coal and gas formation. And I found there is abundant evidence, and this is included by long-age believing scientists, abundant evidence for how to turn naturally occurring vegetation and algae and buried organic sediments into coal, oil and gas. All it takes is a moderate temperature that you find in sedimentary rocks in some parts of the world, 250, 300 degrees centigrade, not that hot in geological surface systems. The right amount of water, there's plenty of water there, the right sort of minerals, certain common clay minerals that you can find in your garden, and you just leave them there weeks or months or a handful of years, and you end up with coal, oil and gas, depending upon the conditions you use. Weeks, months or years, not millions of years or hundreds of millions of years. That happens quickly. And the clincher, the icing on the cake, is there is evidence in oil basins around the world today where you see oil seeps, oil formation. You can carbon date this oil. Now, carbon dating, if you don't know about it, allows you to determine the age of something based upon carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratios, and you can extrapolate an age, and the long ages will extrapolate it to tens of thousands or maybe a couple of 100,000 years. So if oil took 10 million years to form, there is not a carbon-14 atom left. It's gone. It's all gone. There isn't any left. Now, the fact that you find significant amounts of carbon-14 in there says, hey, this oil's relatively young. It's not millions of years old.
Yeah. Wow. What are scientists doing? They know this kind of evidence. They've seen that this is happening or seeing that this is possible. How are they responding to this again? I want to know, because it seems very clear.
After scratching their head, they say, well, I cannot allow a divine foot in the door. I cannot allow a young creation. Therefore, I must find an explanation for this carbon-14. Clearly, there shouldn't be any there. So it must be contamination. Must have come from somewhere else.
What do they mean by that?
So
what sort of?
In my laboratory, in the laboratory, the people were making the measurements. They must have introduced some young carbon in there, and that's where the carbon-14 came from. It was contamination in my analytical chemistry process. That's been proven not to be the case. Very high quality work has shown that contamination doesn't occur. So then they say, well, it must have been contamination in the geological system. Somehow some young carbon got in there. Explain getting young carbon into something buried a few hundred meters. You can't do that. And then, to make it even worse, diamonds, which are supposed to be millions and millions and millions of years old, and there's no way you can get new carbon into them because they are so tightly packed. There's carbon-14 in diamonds. So diamonds aren't millions and millions of years old either. How do they explain this? It's called an anomaly. And in some cases they say, we don't know the explanation yet, but I'm sure we will find it eventually. That's a faith-based position.
Yeah, that sounds faith-based. They don't know yet, but they're going to say this anyway.
And I contend, not everyone would agree with me, but I contend it takes an awful lot more faith to believe in this unobserved events and influences than a young creation. It fits the data so much better. And as a scientist, that sits better with me. If I have no preconceived ideas, a young creation fits the data far, far better. It takes more faith to believe in an old Earth than a young Earth as a scientist.
Stephen, this has been quite a journey. What if someone else wanted to go on this journey as well? Is there anything that you could recommend that would help them?
Yeah, it is. It has been a journey. It's been an intellectual and an emotional journey, and we shouldn't divorce the intellection from the emotions. Both are important. But in terms of my journey as a scientist, one of the best sets of resources I've ever found is the Creation magazine published by Creation Ministries. It is phenomenal. In the hands of a layperson, there are scientists who will not be able to refute anything that's in there. This is high-quality science expressed in the lay way. It is a great publication. And I'll use as an example one of my sons who went through what is often a normal period of teenage and early adulthood rebellion. And as we all struggle with life as we go through that age, he said to me some years ago, he said, "You know, Dad, I could never stay away from God because through the creation and evolution debate and through these sorts of resources, I have seen far too much to be able to refute the existence of God and a young earth."
The Creation magazine that Stephen just mentioned is available at creation.com, or you can go to the link in the description below.